Stephen King has been one of the most praised authors in modern American popular culture. His books and stories have inspired countless artists, and of course, not all of his stories are horror, but he is certainly known for horror and suspense. In the spirit of the spooky season starting once again, I wanted to mention that 2025 has been a great year for horror films, and I had the idea of making a ranking of Stephen King movie adaptations just for fun. Before I begin, I would like to mention that this is just my opinion, and I love to share it with you. So if you agree or disagree, feel free to comment. Also, I want to make some rules before I start. First, only theatrical full-length films will be in this list. So no TV shows, no short films or straight to DVDs and streaming. I will begin this ranking from lowest to highest. There have been 39 adaptations released to this date. Also, this is a potential spoiler warning. And now without further ado, let's begin. 39. Graveyard Shift. A 1990 movie based on the short story of the same name, is often considered one of the weaker King adaptations due to its thin plot and lack of atmosphere. The movie follows mill workers cleaning a rat-infested textile mill, only to be picked off by a giant subterranean creature, but the execution rarely delivers tension or genuine horror. The acting ranges from serviceable to wooden, and the characters feel flat and disposable, which undermines any suspense. While the grimy setting could have provided an effective backdrop for claustrophobic horror, the film instead leans on cheap jumpscares and underwhelming special effects that look dated even for the time. As a result, it comes across more as a shocking creature feature than a faithful or memorable King adaptation. So if you like this movie, I'm sorry to tell you, it got last place. 38. Firestarter. Released in 2022 and based on Stephen King's 1980 novel, follows a young girl with pyrokinetic powers being haunted by a secret government agency. This is the second adaptation of the book, and the story is thin, with many plot points rushed or barely explained, leaving key elements confusing. Zac Efron and Ryan Kira Armstrong give uneven performances, while supporting characters are one-dimensional and forgettable. The special effects meant to show her powers often look fake and overused, and the pacing drags scenes that should feel urgent. Because of these problems, the movie struggles to create tension or interest, making it a flat and forgettable adaptation that fails to live up to the potential of King's original story. 37. Children of the Corn. Released in 2020 and based on Stephen King's short story, first published in the men's magazine Penthouse in 1977 and later collected in his 1978 book Night Shift. The movie tries to turn the story into a tale about children revolting against adults during an ecological crisis, but the plot is weak, uneven, and full of holes. The acting is inconsistent at times, swinging from flat to over the top, and the horror scenes, whether the kids' attacks or the cornfield monster, fail to scare, leaving the film as one of the least effective King adaptations. 36. The Dark Tower. Released in 2017 and based on Stephen King's book series first published in 1982, this is a chaotic adaptation that squanders its potential. The story of the gunslinger chasing the man in black jumps around so much it's hard to follow, and key plot points barely make sense. Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey try to bring energy, but the weak script drags them down, and the action scenes, while occasionally flashy, fail to land. The pacing is uneven, the characters are shallow, and the climax rushes by without payoff, leaving the film feeling like a loud, hollow ride that promises excitement but doesn't deliver in the end. 35. Riding the Bullet. Released in 2004 and based on Stephen King's 2000 book, tells the story of a man grappling with dead and supernatural visions while traveling to see his dying mother. The plot is slow and meandering, with long stretches that add little to the story or suspense. The acting, particularly by the lead, feels flat and unconvincing. The film's horror elements and near-death experiences are not well executed, relying on effects and predictable scares that fail to create tension. 34. The Mangler. Released in 1995 and based on Stephen King's short story from his 1978 collection Night Shift, the story centers on a commercial laundry machine that becomes possessed and starts killing workers. The story spends a lot of time on repetitive factory scenes and clunky exposition, while the characters are underdeveloped and act inconsistently. The acting swings from stiff to exaggerated, and the horror sequences, including the machine's attacks, rely on unconvincing effects that fail to create suspense. The film comes across as absurd and clumsy, making it a largely forgettable adaptation of King's story. 33. Dreamcatcher. Released in 2003 and based on Stephen King's 2001 novel, follows four friends confronting an alien invasion in their small town after a hunting trip. The plot is convoluted, jumping between multiple timelines and perspectives, which makes it hard to follow and dilutes any sense of tension. The actors struggle to make the relationship feel real. The alien effects and gore are heavy-handed and often look artificial, and the pacing drags in slower exposition scenes while rushing through important plot points. Because of the confusing story, weak character arcs, and unconvincing effects, the movie ends up feeling messy, overlong, and unable to deliver effective horror. 32. The Night Flyer. Released in 1997 and based on Stephen King's 1988 short story from his collection Nightmares and Dreamscapes, follows a tabloid reporter tracking a mysterious serial killer who flies in a small plane to murder his victims. The story spends a lot of time on the reporter's interviews and internal monologues, which slows the story and makes the narrative feel uneven. The characters are thinly drawn and the performances range from awkward to exaggerated, leaving little emotional impact. The killer's supernatural elements and the plane sequences use effects that fail to create tension and fear. Number 31. Needful Things. Released in 1993 and based on Stephen King's 1991 novel, Needful Things tells the story of a mysterious shopkeeper who sells items that exploit the desires of a small town's residents, leading to chaos and violence. The story moves through multiple subplots that are often cluttered and confusing, and the characters are numerous but largely underdeveloped. The horror and suspense rely on predictable confrontations and shocks rather than building tension. Number 30. Children of the Corn. Released in 1984, this adaptation builds tension through the isolation of the town, eerie cinematography, and moments of quiet dread. While the children's cold behavior is unsettling and consistent throughout, the acting is sometimes uneven but mostly effective for the low-budget horror tone, and the sparse use of effects keeps the focus on suspense rather than jump scares. The pacing moves steadily, giving the story time to develop its eerie atmosphere. Because of its controlled tension, effective use of setting, and clearer story, the 1984 version manages to create genuine unease and suspense, making it more effective and memorable than the 2020 remake. Number 29. Firestarter from 1984. As I said, it's based on Stephen King's novel of the same name. The movie struggles to balance its intriguing premise with uneven execution, resulting in a film that feels more sluggish than suspenseful. While the story of the young girl with pyrokinetic powers has potential for tension and emotional depth, the film never fully delivers on either. However, Drew Barrymore gives a surprisingly strong performance for her age. The special effects, while good for the era, often feel repetitive and lack the intensity needed to sell the film's central danger. Number 28. No Smoking. Released in 2007 and directed by Anurag Kashyap, follows Kay, a man struggling with his addiction to smoking, who is drawn into a bizarre and surreal rehabilitation program run by a mysterious organization. The film jumps between dreamlike sequences, symbolic imagery, and non-linear storytelling, which already makes it interesting but confusing at times. The visual style is striking, but often prioritizes surrealism over clarity. Because of the confusing structure, shallow character development, and uneven execution, the movie ends up feeling disorienting and frustrating, but still interesting and original enough to be enjoyed. 27. Secret Window. Released in 2004 and based on Stephen King's 1990 novella that follows a writer accused of plagiarism by a mysterious stranger while dealing with personal and creative struggles. The movie develops steadily, focusing on the writer's isolation, tense confrontations, and mounting paranoia, but some sequences stretch longer than necessary, reducing suspense. Johnny Depp's performance is intense and the thriller elements rely on repeated confrontations and predictable twists that might work but feel repetitive at times. Number 26. Tales from the Dark Side. Released in 1990 and based on the 1980s anthology TV series created by legendary horror director George A. Romero, consisting of 3 horror segments framed by a wraparound story of a cursed book. One of the segments being an adaptation of Stephen King's short story Cat from Hell, in which a wealthy man hires a hitman to kill a seemingly ordinary cat that turns out to be supernatural. The segment builds tension through close-ups and eerie music, but with long stretches of exposition that slow the story and reduce the impact of the overall segment. Number 25. Hearts of Atlantis. Released in 2001 and based on Stephen King's 1999 collection of linked stories following a young boy whose life is changed when he meets a mysterious older man with psychic abilities. The plot mixes coming-of-age elements with supernatural hints, but the story often feels disjointed and meanders, making it hard to stay engaged. The supernatural aspects are hinted at rather than fully developed, and the pacing slows in scenes that should build tension and emotion. Number 24. Carrie from 2013. The second adaptation of the story. Based on Stephen King's 1974 novel, following a shy teenage girl with telekinetic powers who faces bullying at school and abuse at home. The film spends considerable time on high school drama and Carrie's strained relationship with her mother. Julianne Moore and Chloe Grace Moretz deliver performances that are good but occasionally exaggerated. The prom climax, while visually flashy, loses impact due to rushed storytelling and overuse of CGI. This adaptation struggles to create real fear or emotional investment, leaving it as a weaker retelling compared to the original 1976 iconic film. Number 23. Apt Pupil. Released in 1998 and based on Stephen King's 1982 novella, follows a high school student who discovers a former Nazi war criminal living in his town and becomes obsessed with his dark past. The story explores their increasingly twisted relationship, with long stretches of dialogue-heavy scenes that slow the narrative but add an element of world-building. Ian McKellen delivers a controlled performance as the war criminal, while Brad Renfro's portrayal of the student fluctuates between charm and intensity. The film's darker themes are handled directly but lack subtlety, and the tension built around their interactions is undermined by some predictable plot beats. In the end, the story is held up by the acting of the two main characters. Number 22. Pet Sematary. Released in 1989 and based on Stephen King's 1983 novel, follows a family that moves to a rural town and discovers a mysterious burial ground with the power to bring the dead back to life. The story spends time establishing the family dynamics and the town's eerie atmosphere. The special effects for the resurrected pets and later human elements are occasionally unconvincing, reducing the impact of key moments, but the tone of the film is convincingly enough to be trapped into the story. In the end, the story is not one of the best adaptations, but is also not one of the worst. Number 21. The Dark Half. Released in 1993 and based on Stephen King's 1989 novel, following a writer whose pseudonym comes to life as a murderous doppelganger, the film spends time establishing the main character's double life and the eerie presence of his sinister counterpart. Timothy Hutton delivers a solid performance. The horror and supernatural elements, including the doppelganger's attacks, rely on practical effects that are occasionally effective. The movie struggles to maintain suspense and ends up feeling less engaging than its source material, but with a solid adaptation of the story. Number 20. The Boogeyman. Released in 1980 and based on Stephen King's 1973 short story From Night Shift, it follows a psychologist investigating the death of children who claim to have been attacked by an unseen entity. The story develops through interviews, supernatural occurrences, and the mounting fear of the victims. The horror relies on suggestions and atmosphere rather than explicit effects. Some attempts at scares feel forced at times, but effective in the end. Finally, the film struggles to maintain tension and ultimately feels less frightening than it could have been. Number 19. Cujo. Released in 1983 and based on Stephen King's 1981 novel, the story follows a mother and her young son trapped in their car by a rabid dog. The film spends time establishing the family dynamics, the dog's illness, and the oppressive summer heat, creating a slow and effective build-up tension. Dee Wallace and Danny Pinatoro give organic performances. The horror relies on suspense, the dog's unpredictable behavior, and close-quarters danger rather than elaborate effects. Because of the focus on realistic threat, the claustrophobic setting, and the escalating tension, the movie succeeds in creating fear and anxiety, making it a more effective and gripping adaptation than many other King horror films. Before I continue, I want to thank you if you are still watching, and don't forget to leave a like, comment, and share this video. And now, let's continue with Number 18. The Running Man. Released in 1987 and loosely based on Stephen King's 1982 novel, it follows a falsely accused man forced to compete in a deadly game where contestants are hunted by professional killers. The film spends time establishing the totalitarian society, the media spectacle of the game, and the protagonist's survival strategies, but the story simplifies much of the novel's social commentary and political satire. Arnold Schwarzenegger delivers his usual physical presence, but many supporting characters are one-dimensional and the dialogue often feels cheesy or overreacted. The action sequences are exaggerated and stylized but effective in the end. The movie comes across as campy and entertaining in parts, but ultimately a shallow adaptation of the King's original story. Number 17. It Chapter 2. Released in 2019 and based on Stephen King's 1986 novel, follows the adult members of the Losers Club returning to Derry to confront Pennywise decades after their first encounter. The story spends a lot of time on flashbacks, personal backstories, and the group's strained relationships, which can slow the pacing at times. The performances are solid. James McAvoy, Jessica Chastain, and Bill Hader deliver moments of intensity. The horror sequences rely heavily on CGI and jump scares, which are visually impressive at times. The film struggles to maintain tension many times during the story, and ends up feeling bloated, less focused, and weaker than the first installment, but a good closure following in the first part of the story. Number 16. The Mist. Released in 2007 and based on Stephen King's 1980 story, following a small town trapped in a supermarket as a mysterious mist filled with deadly creatures descends. The story develops tension by showing the group dynamics, escalating fear, and moral conflicts among the trapped residents, with Thomas Jane and the supporting cast delivering mostly believable performances. The creatures are created with a mix of practical effects and CGI, some of which look convincing and heighten a sense of danger. The pacing maintains suspense for much of the film, balancing quieter character moments with sudden attacks. Because of the strong performances, effective use of tension, and a bleak, shocking ending that reinforces the horror, the movie succeeds at creating fear and unease, making it one of the more effective and memorable King adaptations in recent decades. Number 15. Christine. Released in 1983 and based on Stephen King's 1983 novel, follows a high school student whose obsession with a classic car turns deadly as the car begins to exhibit a violent, supernatural personality. The film spends time establishing the main character's social struggles, his relationship with Christine, and the gradual transformation of both his personality and the car itself, which builds tension over time. Keith Gordon delivers a convincing performance as the increasingly obsessed teenager, while John Stockwell and Alexandra Paul provide solid support. The special effects for the car, particularly the scenes where it moves and attacks, are practical and mostly effective, creating moments of genuine unease. Thanks to the steady build-up of tension, believable performances, and the inventive use of the car as a horror element, the movie manages to be both creepy and entertaining. Number 14. Dr. Sleep. Released in 2019 and based on Stephen King's 2013 novel, follows an adult Danny Torrance as he struggles with alcohol while protecting a jungle with psychic abilities from a cult that feeds on children. The film develops tension through Danny's internal struggles, the eerie presence of the cult, and the use of psychic powers, while Ewan McGregor delivers a strong performance that captures both trauma and determination. Rebecca Ferguson as the cult leader is magnetic and creates a real feeling of unease in her scenes. The horror sequences mix practical effects and CGI, with some moments looking artificial and over-stylized. Thanks to the strong performances, creative visuals, and a mix of horror and character drama, the movie succeeds in being engaging and thrilling, though its uneven pacing and weaker side characters prevent it from fully reaching its potential. And also it doesn't help that this movie is vastly overshadowed by the previous story, The Shining, that I will cover later. Number 13. The Monkey. Released in 2025 and based on Stephen King's 1980 short story, following twin brothers whose lives are thrown into chaos when a cursed wind-up monkey begins causing death and misfortune around them. The film develops tension by showing the brothers struggling to understand the monkey's power, while the danger escalates for those around them. Theo James delivers a convincing performance in the dual roles, and Tatiana Maslany and Elijah Wood provide solid support. The movie balances horror and dark humor using practical effects and careful camera work to make the monkey's attacks feel unsettling without relying solely on jump scares. Number 12. 1408. Released in 2007 and based on Stephen King's 1999 short story From Everything's Eventual, following a skeptical writer who investigates supposedly haunted hotel rooms and becomes trapped in the terrifying hotel room 1408. The movie builds tension through the escalating supernatural events and John Cusack's performance, which convincingly portrays fear, frustration, and desperation. The supporting cast is minimal, leaving most of the emotional weight on Cusack. Because of the strong lead performance, effective use of suspense, and inventive horror sequences, the movie manages to be genuinely frightening. Number 11. Life of Chuck. Released in 2025 and based on Stephen King's 2020 novella, tells the story of Chuck Krantz in reverse, moving from his death at the end of the universe to his childhood. The film builds emotional weight by showing the choices and events that shape Chuck's life, highlighting his relationships, struggles, and quiet moments of joy, with Tom Hiddleston giving a nuanced performance that captures the character at different stages of life. Supporting actors like Chiwetel Ejiofor and Karen Gillan add depth. Mike Flanagan's direction balances melancholic feelings, subtle humor, and moments of quiet tension, while the non-linear narrative keeps the audience engaged but can feel a little uneven at times. And now we are entering to the top 10. Number 10. The Long Walk. Released in 2025, directed by Francis Lawrence and based on the Stephen King's 1979 novel, presents a dystopian future where 50 teenage boys are forced to walk continuously until one remains alive. The film's narrative centers on Ray Garrity and his evolving relationship with fellow walker Peter McBreeze as they navigate the brutal and unforgiving contest. The cinematography, led by Joe Williams, captures the desolate landscapes and the physical and emotional toll on the participants. While the film has been praised for its performances and emotional depth, some critics have noted that the pacing can drag at times, and the philosophical themes may not be clear with all viewers. Overall, The Long Walk offers a haunting exploration of endurance and human spirit in the face of relentless adversity. Number 9. It Part 1. Released in 2017 and based on Stephen King's 1986 novel, and the first part of the previous one I mentioned in the list. Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise delivers a chilling and unpredictable performance as the clown. The young cast, including Jaden Martell and Sophia Lillis, give natural and convincing portrayals that make the danger feel real. The horror sequences balance jump scares with creepy visuals. Because of the strong performances from the children, effective atmosphere, good script, and Skarsgård's unsettling presence, the movie manages to be genuinely frightening and entertaining. Number 8. Dolores Claiborne, released in 1995 and based on Stephen King's 1992 novel, follows a housekeeper accused of murder as she recounts her life, revealing the abuse she suffered at the hands of her husband and the struggles of raising her daughter. The film builds its story by showing Dolores' daily hardships, her complicated relationship with her daughter, and the moral choices she faces, with Kathy Bates delivering a raw, intense performance that captures both toughness and vulnerability. The movie relies on dialogue, character decisions, and slow unfolding of events rather than action or visual effects. Number 7. The Green Mile. Released in 1999 and based on Stephen King's 1996 serialized novel, follows the lives of death row guards who encounter John Coffey, an inmate with miraculous healing powers. The film spends time developing the daily routines of the prison, the relationships among the guards, and the mysterious abilities of Coffey, allowing audiences to understand the character's motivations and moral dilemmas. Tom Hanks delivers a steady and empathetic performance, while Michael Clark Duncan's portrayal of John Coffey is powerful and emotional. Because of the strong lead performances, careful attention to character interactions, and emotionally charged story, the movie succeeds at creating tension and empathy, making it a moving and memorable adaptation of King's work. Number 6. The Dead Zone, released in 1983 and based on Stephen King's 1979 novel, follows Johnny Smith, who awakens from a coma with psychic abilities that allow him to see the future and past of the people he touches. The movie builds its story by showing Johnny's struggles to understand and control his powers, his isolation from society, and the moral dilemmas he faces when foreseeing dangerous events. Christopher Walken delivers a restrained and convincing performance, portraying both vulnerability and determination. While supporting characters like Brooke Adams add emotional depth, the movie mixes suspenseful moments, dramatic interactions, and eerie imagery. The film succeeds in the end to be an engaging psychological thriller with a mix of suspense and drama. Number 5. Misery. Released in 1990 and based on Stephen King's 1987 novel, follows author Paul Sheldon, played by James Caan, after a car crash leaves him at the mercy of Annie Wilkes, played by Kathy Bates, a former nurse who becomes dangerously obsessed with him. The film develops the story by showing Paul trapped, struggling to survive, while Annie's mood swings create constant fear and unpredictability. Kathy Bates gave a terrifying Oscar-winning performance that made Annie unforgettable. The movie keeps viewers engaged with the escalating danger and psychological games. Thanks to the strong performances, the unrelenting sense of fear, and the careful build-up of suspense, the movie results in a gripping, disturbing thriller. Number 4. The Shawshank Redemption. Released in 1994 and based on Stephen King's novella Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, follows banker Andy, played by Tim Robbins, who is sentenced to life in Shawshank State Penitentiary for a crime he didn't commit. The movie develops its story by showing Andy navigating prison life, forming a friendship with Red, played by Morgan Freeman, and using his intelligence to survive and help others. Morgan Freeman brings warmth and wisdom to Red, while Tim Robbins portrays Andy's quiet determination and resilience convincingly. The interactions, prison environment, and small victories keep the story engaging. Finally, the strong performances, the believable relationships, and the careful depiction of life behind bars, the movie succeeds as a moving and engrossing drama that might bring some people to tears. Finally, the top 3. Before I finish the list, I would like to say that Stephen King has been adapted to more than just theatrical films. Many TV series, short films, and straight-to-DVD and streaming are worth watching, like It, Salem's Lot, The Outsider, Castle Rock, and many to come. Now, let's wrap it up. Number 3. Stand By Me. Released in 1986 and based on Stephen King's novella The Body, follows 4 boys: Goldie, played by Will Wheaton, Chris, played by River Phoenix, Teddy, played by Corey Feldman, and Vern, played by Jerry O'Connell. It follows a journey to find the body of a missing boy. The film develops its story by showing the boys' interactions, their personal fears, and the small challenges they face on the way, highlighting friendship, loyalty, and growing up. River Phoenix delivers a standout performance, as Chris capturing both toughness and vulnerability, while Will Wheaton portrays Cody's introspection and grief effectively. The boys' friendship, small victories, and moments of humor keep the story engaging. The movie has strong performances, believable relationships, and natural depiction of childhood struggles. Number 2. Carrie. The first movie ever to be adapted from a book by Stephen King follows Carrie White, played by Sissy Spacek, a shy high school girl who discovers she has telekinetic powers while dealing with her abusive mother, played by Piper Laurie. The film develops its story by showing Carrie's isolation, the small humiliations she suffers, and the mounting pressure that leads to her explosive retaliation at the prom. Sissy Spacek delivers a haunting, unbelievable performance, capturing both vulnerability and growing fury, while Piper Laurie portrays her mother's religious fanaticism in a chilling way. Brian De Palma manages to direct the movie, displaying his style and directorial talent. The movie succeeds as a thrilling and emotionally charged horror story that has become part of popular culture throughout the decades. And finally, number 1. You might already know which one it is: The Shining. Released in 1980 and based on Stephen King's 1977 novel, follows Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson, as he takes a job as the winter taker of the isolated Overlook Hotel with his wife Wendy, played by Shelley Duvall, and son Danny, played by Danny Lloyd. The film develops its story by showing Jack's slow descent into madness, Danny's psychic shining abilities, and the supernatural forces that manipulate and terrify the family. Jack Nicholson delivers an unforgettable performance, capturing both charm and menace, while Shelley Duvall convincingly portrays fear and desperation. Directed by legendary director Stanley Kubrick, he created haunting visuals, unsettling atmosphere, and escalating danger that keeps the audience engaged. The movie has become a matter of study in film schools and has stood the test of time as one of the best Stanley Kubrick films. Thank you so much if you stayed this long, and as I said earlier, this is just my opinion. If you agree or disagree, feel free to comment. If you liked the video, please leave a like and share. This was everything for today, and see you next time.